Hi everyone, I'm Darshana. So today I thought of talking about a topic that is relevant to social media and posting in social media networks like Facebook and Twitter, and to some extent YouTube as well, but more relevant to Facebook and Twitter. I think that is this idea of fact checking, and so the basic idea is that when you post something on Facebook. For instance, Facebook will claim that if there's misinformation or if there's any information that can cause social unrest or something, particularly misinformation, right? Information that may not be accurate. So there will be these independent bodies called fact checkers or fact checking organizations that will automatically have some kind of a software to automatically identify whether what is the type of post that you have, right? So that will be like some kind of an algorithm and a piece of AI software that will detect the topic and that will detect whether there is kind of deviating from the standard idea related to that topic. For instance, if you take this US election, so there were allegations by the Trump campaign that there were mass election. There was mass election fraud, and that affected the outcome, right? So that now, if that the software will identify that that claim is being made, and maybe some argument is made or some evidence is given or some testimonial or something related to that, and it will the software will automatically flag it and maybe link it to a fact check, right? So the fact checker might say that this statement is not accurate. It might give you a warning, or it might not allow you to post it, or if it even if you post it, it might not show it to others, or have all sorts of restrictions. And I mean, in the worst case, your account might get blocked or suspended or things like that can happen. So so that's the basic idea, right? So now the problem with that approach, so I just need to highlight a problem with that approach. The problem with that approach is that who are these fact checkers? So I thought of taking an example from Sri Lankan context, because we have experienced this in the Sri Lankan context as well when we post articles. So there's, for instance, this particular fact-checking organization called factcresendo apparently has some agreement with Facebook. So when you post something in Sinhala, if it is like deviating from some kind of a standard narrative, Facebook will flag it as inaccurate. Right? Now, if you go to the website of factcresendo, it clearly says that it is a. So they claim that they are an independent, unbiased fact-checking website, and so and so. And apparently they support so many different languages in the region, including Sinhalese. But actually, in the first sentence in the About Us page, it says that it is a private limited liability company registered in India, even though they cater for all the posts in all these languages. Like, so, for instance, Sinhala and maybe Bengali are used in other countries, right? Not just in India. So anyway, this company that is registered in India has some kind of authority on what people in Sri Lanka can and cannot post, because Facebook has given them that status. And if we look at the people involved, right, most of them are Indians. There's one person called Sahan Pereira here who is currently the managing editor, but only that person is mentioned there. The important thing is that this is a private company, right? Private limited liability company. That means there should be some stakeholders, some shareholders. So there's no mention about who's funding this company and who are the real owners and so on. So now whenever you have a private company, limited liability company, I mean, you can't really claim that it's an independent organization because you are liable to the shareholders, right? So the shareholders basically control the direction of the organization, and I mean they can intervene. They can basically hire and fire anyone. CEO can hire and fire anyone, and shareholders can hire and fire the CEO. When you say independent, usually in the state sector, when we say independent, usually the party that appoints you should not be able to fire you. So this claim of independence and so on is just names. There's no real meaning to that. The other issue is it's when you have a private company, it's basically profit oriented. So now if I have a lot of money and if there's some news circulating around me, so I could be a government or I could be a large corporation. I can basically pay you a lot of money to somehow come up with a fact-checking article to identify some gaps in some article and prevent it from circulating in social media, because the term fact is also, I mean, we have this notion that facts are facts and they denote the truth, but for any situation or any phenomenon there can be infinite number of facts that can be construed, but we can choose to look at certain facts and omit some of the other facts, right? There's always omission is always an option. So even this idea of facts, whether they give the whole picture is questionable. But even if we leave that aside, and then usually a fact should be something that should be objectively verifiable. Right? Now, if you take something like the election, US election, it's a huge operation, and whether you can do a grand claim about something without observing all the evidence, all the because usually there's two sides to or multiple sides to every story. So whether you can have a one-dimensional view, just a blanket statement on something like that. It's not like measuring the volume of a basket or volume of or length of a car or something. It's not that objectively verifiable whether an election is fraudulent. It's a much more complex process, and usually it takes some detailed investigation to verify something like that. So whether you can do so-called fact-checking on something like that, which is anyway a very contentious issue, and there can be multiple sides to this story, it's really questionable. So it's yeah. Now, if you take this particular organization, factcresendo, now I will just there are a couple of articles that they are in single. I won't go into the details of these articles, but some of the articles, I don't know, looks like they mention some name of kind of a pseudonames as well. These articles are written by people with pseudonyms, and some articles clearly they are not fact-checking articles, right? They are basically what you call PR pieces, public relations pieces written for damage control. So and it's just there's no going into the source material. I will share these links for anyone interested. It's just giving some opinion and maybe just quoting just one party of the story, just one party, and just quoting them and be basically reiterating that what one particular party has said. Never going to the source material, never interviewing all the stakeholders involved, just a PR piece. And that's okay. I mean, anyone can do that. You can take some money and do that. But the problem is Facebook has given these organizations a position of arbitration. So they have placed. So when you post something, there will be contending views, and whoever who's reading or viewing this stuff in social media, they can make up with their own mind. They can process all these different information, different opinions, and come up with the conclusion. The problem is now Facebook. I mean, this happened quite recently. Facebook or the other social media companies, what they have done is they have placed this arbitrator on top, supposedly independent arbitrator, which is not independent at all. And they are the ones who decide what goes in and what does not go in. Right? So that is a problem, because then what you have is basically a censorship machine, censorship apparatus in social media, right? Because these organizations, they may have political biases, these fact checkers. So even the term fact checker is a very dubious term. It's basically a politically correct way of saying censorship. When you say fact checking, okay, it's just it's very dubious. So and if you look at an example, now one might say, okay, we'll look at another example, which is a more global fact-checking organization called Politifact, which is which is one of the fact-checking. There are multiple fact-checking companies, organizations, and Politifact is one of them. And they also claim that they are non-partisan, and all the keywords are there. And they have even in About Us page, they have a page called Who Pays for Politifact. At least they have such a page, but factcresendo, they don't have anything like that. So we don't know who's funding these people, right? And if you go to that, budget, public financial disclosure, there's nothing there actually. I mean, it's registered under a company called Poynter Institute, organization called Poynter Institute, and there is a person called Neil Brown. I mean, he's the person who's the principal officer, and so majority of income is coming from grants. So it doesn't say who's giving these grants, right? It's just the grants. So again, we don't know. And if we look at about this Poynter Institute, they have this president is Neil Brown, and they also own a newspaper called Tampa Bay Times, right, which is kind of a regional newspaper in Florida, I guess. And if you look at these particular newspaper, there's a lot of sports news and all these things, regional news, but whatever the political articles that they have, there's a clear liberal bias, right? Clear liberal bias. So these people are not independent people. I mean, these Poynter Institute owns both Politifact and Tampa Bay Times. And there was a recent incident that actually proved that these people are basically political activists. That this Poynter Institute actually published a blacklist of websites. Basically, all websites were conservative websites in the US, right? So there was a huge backlash, and they had to retract blacklist. So obviously they are political, they have liberal bias. Again, that's fine. I mean, they can do politics, but the problem is these people are given these by the social media companies. They are given these status that they are this unwarranted power that they can basically control the information in social media. So Facebook is not directly doing it, Twitter is not directly doing it. They are like doing it in a roundabout way by using these so-called fact-checking organizations. And now one might say, okay, these corporations are private corporations, Facebook, Twitter. If you are not happy on how they do business, you can always go for an alternative. Yeah. But the problem is these social media companies they greatly affect the public discourse and public opinion, and then at the same time they have become monopolies, right? So recently there was this incident that all these big tech companies got together to shut down Parler. So Parler was kind of a upcoming social media which is a competitor to Twitter and to some extent Facebook as well. And they were not doing this kind of fact checking, right? So basically they took out Parler because more people, particularly conservatives, started moving to Parler, and now it's not there. So there are some other websites, some other social media companies like Gab and Rumble, all these alternative. So now there's what you call alternative social media because of this censorship. But still, Parler was much more popular, right? So the other thing I want to highlight is that now, if one argues that all these social media companies are private corporations, then they can do whatever they want. The problem with that argument is that now these companies are regulated under Section 213 Communications Decency Act in the United States. So all these companies are registered in the US, and under that these companies are registered as they are basically registered as content providers or platforms, not as publishers, which is why when these platforms are used for some illegal activity, they are not usually held liable for that, right? For instance, if someone posts child pornography on Facebook is not liable for that. If the government or someone prosecutes that case, they will only prosecute who published those pictures, not Facebook, because they are not regarded as a publisher in criminal cases or defamation cases. But at the same time, they go out on a limb and they basically do censorship. So in that instance, they're actually acting like a publisher. So there's a double standard there, because if you are going to act like a publisher, then you should be held liable for all the illegal activity, all the defamation that happens through these social media platforms, and they are not taking any of it. But at the same time, they are doing censorship. So it's a huge lapse in the US legal system, I guess, and now it is becoming apparent that these companies have unchecked power because of that. I think they should be treated as platforms, in which case they should not have the right to censor, do any kind of censorship. And same way, when you use a telephone or a mobile phone to do some crime, you don't accuse the mobile phone operator, right? So same way. Now one might question, how do you deal with all the illegal activity that might happen? So you basically will have to take case by case, just like what you do with crimes that are enabled through any technology like email or mobile communication. You don't eavesdrop all the conversations, and you don't censor people. You just have a more reactive approach. I think that is the best thing that we can do while preserving the freedom of expression and while checking the power, not allowing these companies to basically control the flow of information and enabling the social media to be used in a productive and in a way where you can freely exchange ideas and test out ideas, right? Because otherwise they will just become propaganda tools for a political agenda, which effective they have, for the most part they have become that, and which is harmful because few people might be able to control the flow of information, right? Okay, that's basically what I want to talk about today. I will share some of the links to some of the things that I discussed today, and if you have any thoughts, feel free to post a comment, and see you again with a similar video. Thank you.